Okay. Good morning to the media. Good morning to the viewers out there and listeners. Good morning to our supporters and well-wishers and our colleagues that have joined us here this morning. This morning, we are having our normal Sunday morning press conference at the leader of the opposition office in Port of Spain. As you, let me firstly introduce myself. I am David Lee, Member of Parliament, Point-de-Pierre, and also Chief Whip for the opposition in the Parliament. This morning I am joined with me, my colleague, the MP for Chaguanas West, the Honourable Dinesh Rambali, who shadows the Attorney General Office and Legal Affairs, and also shadows and straddles issues on crime and legal matters. Today we will be, firstly, MP Dinesh will be giving his presentation, and after I will turn over, I will give my own on energy and affairs. Debacle of Atlantic Train 1 NGC and the Prime Minister's question that I asked him on Friday in Parliament. So I want to thank you all again, and let me turn you over to MP Dinesh Rambali, Member of Parliament for Chaguanas West.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Lee, members of the media, citizens all. Of course, it is my privilege and pleasure to join with you this morning. I know a lot of persons this morning would be caught up with the cricket, but you know, Aussies and of course the Kiwis. But I think it is important that we continue to keep track of the issues that are plaguing the nation at this time. And of course, being a loyal opposition, we cannot falter in any way. And given the mandate from our political leader, the Honourable Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, it is of course her mandate that we must ensure that we keep track of the issues and keep you informed as we keep the government accountable, and to ensure that our democratic rights are enforced, and of course at all times they are not denied or suppressed in any way. I would like to really talk about this morning what I label taxation without representation. And I want to go a little bit further, taxation without representation, and I want to say the current definition of tyranny. And there's a reason why I use such strong language, the current definition of tyranny. And as I get into my presentation this morning, in this press conference, you will understand what Trinidad and Tobago is really facing at this time. And I want to start off with the American politician James Otis, who famously said, "Taxation without representation is tyranny." What this Rowley-led government is doing is nothing short of tyrannical. On Friday, you will recall that the government brought the extremely flawed Revenue Authority bill to the Parliament. It was in the Senate previously, and it came to the lower house on last Friday. And after the opening rebuttal by the leader of the opposition, the government, unable to withstand the opposition's scrutiny, quickly collapsed the debate. The Chief Whip will bear testimony to this, that this is what took place. The opposition leader had pointed out clear ways in which this Revenue Authority bill was a threat to the constitutional privacy and property rights of our citizens. She carefully demonstrated the ways in which this proposed Revenue Authority bill could be used as a political tool. The opposition has always maintained that this proposed Revenue Authority cannot engender the confidence of the population. And the fact that the government so quickly collapsed their own debate when confronted with stark facts means they themselves appear to have no confidence in their own bill. Imagine that whilst the member for San Fernando East was talking and making his contribution in the Parliament, the acting leader of government business, Terence Dialsing, suddenly got up and moved to adjourn the debate. He was in the booth and he was contributing, and Mr. Dialsing got up and just quickly moved to have the debate wound up at that point in time. Mr. Manning was like a night watchman. As the opposition leader rightly pointed out, excuse me, as she rightly pointed out, that instead of fixing the issues with the Board of Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise, the government is following a playbook subverting our independent institutions. They have a hunger for control, and if they can't control them, they will just mash them up. But this nefarious revenue authority also represents the fundamental quality of this Rowley-led P&M administration, and that is the willingness to punish and blame the citizens of this country for the P&M's own failures. So the Prime Minister have done nothing, or having done nothing over the past 6 years to encourage any kind of economic growth and diversification, has the audacity to blame the citizens of this country for the P&M's own failure to diversify the economy. So the Prime Minister and his bandwagon of non-performers treat us citizens as if we exist simply to give them money. Citizens in this country want to pay their taxes, however uninspired they are, and however much they are not convinced that their taxes are working for them. But they also want the government to do its job. Last week, when one of my colleagues asked the Minister of Public Utilities, why is it that rural areas like Tabakit are suffering from a lack of water, the Minister told her that it was the opposition's fault, that people didn't have any water, and that people shouldn't complain because the whole country is suffering. As shocking as that logic is, that is governance P&M Rowley-led style. That is the level of arrogance and lack of concern about how your tax money is being used and spent. There is no accountability, and that is what I say is tyranny and dishonesty. That is taxation without representation. So this government will be enhancing its tax collection, but has not convinced us that it is going to use taxpayer money to actually and genuinely improve the efficiency of services for people. Have you noticed how your tax obligations are plastered all over the place, but your entitlement to the benefits therefrom is mostly hidden away? Just finding out what you are entitled to from your taxation is like what we say in common parlance, pulling teeth. Citizens in this country are facing the worst economic crisis for generations. There is mass unemployment. Businesses are closing down every day, but all the government is concerned about is taking money away from citizens without duly delivering what they are required to do to the people. MP Lee, who is here with me today, will tell you more about the financial disaster the government created with 3-in-1 at the NGC, National Gas Company, where millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars was metaphorically flushed down the sewer pipe by this government. The same government that is coming with the Revenue Authority Bill to inflict the most oppressive taxation under the guise of financial responsibility. I would also like to discuss the serious concerns with how this Revenue Authority Bill would impact the existing Board of Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise Division, which are both being amalgamated into the new Revenue Authority. The government is saying that this amalgamation will be trim and efficient. On a first glance, this Revenue Authority looks like more a trim and concise body, which ought to herald a new era of doing business. This is what they would have us believe. But on a closer examination, we would see that the apparently elegant Revenue Authority is split down the middle as it operates under two different systems. In this Revenue Authority, which is being proposed, we have a situation in which different people are hired under different regimes with different tenure and different remuneration packages, and they are all going to be working in the same organization, the Revenue Authority. So what you can see with this lineup, instead of reducing the bureaucracy, the Revenue Authority will be a gigantic bureaucratic machine. Inevitably, the chain of command is bound to get distorted. Conflicts of interest are bound to arise. and inevitably workers, employees may be drawn in different directions ideologically. This nebulous design is inevitably the chain of command is bound to get distorted. Conflicts of interest are bound to arise, and inevitably workers, employees may be drawn in different directions ideologically. This nebulous design is being done on purpose in order to circumvent the requirement for a special majority. This administration has set up the Revenue Authority like a pretzel, bending in every direction. It is anything but straightforward, and this is the reason why we are talking about it again today, so that the population can be reminded and will ensure that it keeps its fingers on the pulse. This manner in which this government creates loopholes in order to bypass special majority legislation, which is there to protect constitutional rights and liberties of citizens, is downright dangerous. The government continually finds ways to transform special majority bills, like this one, Revenue Authority Bill, into a simple majority one, because according to them, the opposition wouldn't support it, which is the same as them saying they need to rewrite laws they don't like because it would mean that what they are doing is illegal. We have grown somewhat accustomed to that kind of tactic and strategy, and as usual, we in the opposition will not be silenced. We will discharge our parliamentary responsibility, notwithstanding the many attempts to silence us, and by extension, silence the democratic voice of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Talking about accountability and transparency, the opposition wants to make it clear that the Revenue Authority Bill fails to strike the right balance between privacy and accountability. We are told that the board will not have access to the authority's information on persons or documents concerning legal proceedings, but that appears to be unconvincing. A government that created the crisis, this recent and continuing crisis in the Police Service Commission, cannot be trusted with the confidential data of citizens. The very power hierarchy of this Revenue Authority Bill is troubling. The Minister of Finance, his footprints are all over this bill. He is everywhere. It would seem that the Revenue Authority cannot truly be independent of the suasion of the Minister of Finance. For example, the entire board is appointed by the Minister. The Director General is appointed by the Minister and is subject to his policy decisions. The Director General would also be subject to the policy directions of the Minister. We are told that Clause 14D, that the Deputy Director General Enforcement would be subject to the general policy directions of the Minister, which would be communicated to him through the Director General. Is this not saying that the Director General is the mouthpiece of the Minister? And can we truly guess at the scope and meaning of the general policy directions? Who is to determine what is general versus a specific policy direction? Who is to determine what is guidance that is optional versus what is a directive? This arrangement might give the appearance of distance between these two offices, but when you put that into law, which is what they're seeking to do, that you are communicating something to someone through someone else, that is a confusing chain of command which can inevitably lead to confusion and misunderstanding. The Minister of Finance's reach doesn't end there. The Director General and the Deputy Directors General would be appointed by the Minister by notification subject to affirmation resolution of Parliament. Even the very rules of the board are subject to the approval of the Minister. So, the Minister rules the roost. When so much doubt is being cast on our systems, and we are here trying to kickstart the new incarnation of the Board of Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise Division, surely the very least that we can do is to take account of the inadequacies and areas of failure, so that at the very least we might eliminate a problem. The government is not displaying that they are taking any of these concerns or factors into account. What is the use of painting the fence without first scrubbing off the moss. When we look at enforcement, the role of the Deputy Director General Enforcement appears to be a rather curious one. He is the person charged with the running of an entire division called the Enforcement Division. His main charge is the enforcement of customs laws, excise act and other revenue laws. Right away one can understand his powers just by appreciating the sheer scope of the related revenue laws. And he is supposed to enjoy a kind of insulated position. He is appointed by the Public Service Commission, not the minister. His tenure is not the same as the other directors. And as we can see, a most convoluted chain of command is detectable. And when you look at the law, which I will not get into, but the clauses, he exercises an advisory role to the Director General, and I want to quote, on any matter that could improve the effectiveness or efficiency of the administration of the Enforcement Division or the enforcement of the customs laws and other revenue laws. So he also has an advisory role by which he is to advise the Director General on any matter that could improve the effectiveness or efficiency of his division. We are also aware that at the same time, this Deputy Director General Enforcement is subject to the general policy directions of the Minister, which shall be communicated to him through the Director General. So let us just tie it in all together. Who is really advising who? Without apparently talking to each other, the Minister and the Deputy Director General of Enforcement have a conference room embodied in the Director General, and no doubt policies are set in these informal channels of communication. So no matter how much they try to dress it up and they say one position is being insulated from the Minister, what it boils down to it is all linked to the Minister of Finance. What happens when there is a conflict between a ministerial policy directive clashing with the advice of the Deputy Director General of Enforcement? So the Revenue Authority Bill should have at least provided for some mechanisms, if they were serious about it, for dispute resolution within the Revenue Authority itself. We have seen none of those things. If only because roles and functions of the various offices are vague at best and are not clearly delineated and may easily cause friction. Given that the Deputy Director General of Enforcement is there until retirement and the other directors may not be, the influence of this particular Deputy Director General Enforcement can have very far-reaching consequences. It may very well set the tone of the Revenue Authority for years to come. All of these are matters which will, of course, be debated. But the population must be aware that the demonizing of the present scheme of inland revenue is calculated to make this Revenue Authority Bill seem cosmetically, aesthetically, beautiful, and it is far from. So how can we truly believe that this is an independent body? How can we repose trust in the Revenue Authority? How can we abide when we see all these glaring deficiencies in the bill? So the opposition maintains that the Revenue Authority is unethical, it is immoral, and it poses a danger to the privacy and property rights of all citizens. Such is the fundamental breach of constitutional rights in order to facilitate government overreach. The opposition, of course, Dr. Lee, our political leader, all the MPs for the opposition will continue to oppose all taxation without representation and will continue to oppose the attacks on the Constitution and freedoms of citizens by this dictatorial regime. Of course, Dr. Lee, I wanted to talk a little bit about crime and some other topics, but I know that time we would want to move forward. So I would like to thank all of you for your time this morning, and I would like to hand back over to our most esteemed Chief Whip in the Parliament and colleague MP for Point of View.
Thank you, MP Dinesh Rambali, Member of Parliament for Chaguanas West. I think you took up all your 20-minute speaking time there, and you went over. So, but that was very good points that you raised this morning here, because our role as an opposition basically is to keep certain things alive in the public domain. And what you would have heard from MP Rambali is about the TTRA, Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority, and what transpired on Friday in Parliament, where we thought that we were coming to debate and complete that TTRA bill, the Revenue Authority bill, because we were told by the government that we were going to carry it through to all stages of that particular bill. So we were very surprised at the end of our two speakers, especially after the end of our opposition leader's response. She was our first responder, that they literally collapsed and adjourned the debate on that TTRA based on what I think, I'm sure that the opposition leader had raised in her rebuttal. Certain things were about the 3/5, the illegality of the bill, and MP Dinesh touched on it, and I think we will touch on it further in our debate whenever they bring back that bill, about the public servants, and literally, and I would use the word demise of the public servants in respect of the Board of Inland Revenue, in respect of the Customs and Excise departments, etc. So we'll say more on that, and thank you, MP Dinesh. And I now will get into my presentation as a Member of Parliament appointed here and the shadow for the Ministry of Energy. And I want to start off by saying, to use a word or a phrase that MP Dinesh had said that in his presentation, and he used the word metaphorically when he talked about NGC flushing down the millions of dollars. And I want to say it's not metaphorically. They actually wasted, NGC and this government wasted millions of dollars via NGC as a corporation and in respect to Atlantic LNG Train 1. So let me get into my presentation. Now on Friday, there was a part of Parliament called Prime Minister's Question Time. And we have an opportunity of 30 minutes to raise questions, file questions to the Prime Minister. And I was fortunate to file a question to the Prime Minister. I had several questions that I wanted to file, and I filed one particular one, and it was approved to be asked. And I want to read it out to the media here and to the listeners and the viewers out there this morning. And the question I asked the Prime Minister on Friday, and I want to quote it: given the Prime Minister's statement that BP and Shell have indicated that they do not have a supply of gas for Train 1, Atlantic Train 1 that is, and a definitive decision will be made on the plant at the end of the first quarter in 2022, can the Prime Minister state the alternative supplies of gas that would be utilized to operate the plant until then? Now, that question I posed to the Prime Minister was in direct related to when he came back from his trip from Glasgow, and he had a press conference at the airport, and he talked about Atlantic Train 1, and then he talked about 34 or 33 million US dollars, that's approximately $240 million TT, was spent, in his view, the number that he was given on Atlantic Train 1 turnaround. So that was a question I posed to the Prime Minister on Friday in Parliament. He gave me an answer, a response that basically did not do justice to the question, and I will expand on that further on. Now, if I had the other opportunity, I had 3 other questions I would like to ask the Prime Minister, and I want to put it to the media here today, and it will be in part of my presentation. Another question I would have liked to ask the Prime Minister: could the Prime Minister state if the government was aware before funding the Atlantic Train 1 turnaround was approved, that the NGC strategy was to rely on petrochemical plants, that's the downstream plants, remaining shut down so as to use the unutilized gas for Train 1? So that was another question I would have liked to pose to the Prime Minister. Another question I would have liked to pose to the Prime Minister is this: given that both BP and Shell have reiterated their positions of having no gas to supply Atlantic Train 1, as well as the NGC's plan of obtaining unutilized gas from the shutdown plants has failed, can the Prime Minister state if there is any regret for the loss of the over $250 million on the rescue package for Train 1, That was another question I would like to ask the Prime Minister. And the final one, and I would add, could the Prime Minister state if the Chinese company called Summer Soka, who has a 10% stakeholding in Atlantic Train 1, what is their interest in the future in Train 1? And I will leave that for now, and that is a company who has a 10% holding in Train 1, a Chinese company called Summer Soka. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to start off by saying yet again, the opposition is vindicated. I want to say the opposition is vindicated. Yet again, our concerns have been proven right, as we confirm to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that regardless of the political spin this government wants to put forward, Atlantic Train 1 is dead. No matter how they want to spin it, Atlantic Train 1 is dead. They were told by BP and Shell back in 2019 that they had no gas to supply Atlantic Train 1. And I will expand on that further. And I want to remind the population here and the media that when the Prime Minister returned on his trip, he stated in that conference in the airport, and I want to quote the doctor, and I quoted him, the Prime Minister, the doctor is not putting on his coat, as the Prime Minister stated, but in fact Train 1, in my view, is waiting to be buried. The evidence is clear. The media reports are damning. It is not, as the Prime Minister has stated, that the doctor is putting on his coat, but rather Train 1 is waiting to be buried. It is a time that this government ends its lies, deceits, and misleading statements. On Friday, when I asked the Prime Minister in Parliament what supply of gas would be utilized until the definitive decision is made on Train 1 in March 2022, according to the Prime Minister, he could not list one single source of gas to assist Atlantic Train 1. Citizens, it is clear the plant will not be able to operate. Since 2019, they have been mamagaing the population, hiding the truth on the reality of Train 1. Since 2019, when BP informed this government that there were no gas for Train 1, they downplayed it by telling the nation and us and the opposition gas would come. It never did, and we are still waiting for that. In 2021, every time the opposition demanded answers, they misled us, telling us and telling the country negotiations were at a sensitive stage, and we couldn't understand that sensitive stage, fully aware it wasn't going to happen. And they keep hiding behind this phrase of it is every negotiations is confidential and at a sensitive stage, and we can't understand that sensitivity, and we don't have the knowledge, the experience to understand that. But they have been fooling the population. They have been hiding behind those words and telling and making us feel that we don't understand what is going on. But yet today, as we speak, millions of dollars have been wasted, and we are yet to see any turnaround in Atlantic Train 1. They even went so far to list gas projects such as Manatee and Calypso as a public relations stunt to feel the nation that gas was coming. And they were fully aware that that was not a solution, because the Manatee and the Calypso are literally 5 years away, and who God alone knows if it will ever become operational. The Prime Minister fully knew that Train 1 was dead on arrival when he entered the BP boardroom on his trip recently. Last Saturday, when he returned from the UK, the Prime Minister sought to give us a sad story, as if he had only now received clarity from BP and Shell that they had no gas for Train 1. The Prime Minister was fully aware, and his team, when he entered that boardroom, that Train 1 was dead on arrival, as the companies had told him so in 2019, and he reminded him in December 2020. After 20 years, Train 1 became a victim of this government's mismanagement of the gas sector. Train 1 benefited us as a nation for over 20 years, until its contract came to an end in 2018 pending renewal. However, the shareholders faced different conditions in 2020, the shareholders being BP and Shell, the major shareholders, that they could find no business case. They found the largest shareholders, BP and Shell, could find no business case, no justification to continue the Train 1 contract because they simply had no gas. And I want to say this was a direct result by this government failing over the last 6 years to create an environment for increased gas production. They did not create an environment to assist our gas companies, our energy companies, friendly or incentives to go out and look for gas. The suppliers simply had no gas for Train 1. As a country, we must ask, with the largest gas producers, which are in Trinidad and Tobago, which are BP, saying that they had no gas for Train 1, why would National Gas Company opt to invest in that turnaround in Atlantic Train 1? And the NGC only had a 10% stake in Atlantic Train 1. The fact is that both the NGC and the government saw this as a perfect opportunity to cover up the massive losses the NGC have been making since that Houston negotiation in 2017, that infamous Houston trip, and that negotiations that was taken in with the upstreamers and the high price of gas that the upstreamers were now charging the country. Since 2017, the NGC has been struggling to conclude contracts with downstreamers because of the high price of gas that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy and the team agreed on in Houston. Hence the reason we saw NGC recorded for the first time in the history a $2 billion loss in 2020. For the first time in our history, NGC, which has always been a profit making billions of dollars for this country and the taxpayers of our country, have recorded for the first time a $2 billion loss in 2020. The NGC therefore choose to gamble with your money, that's the taxpayers, our money, in an effort to cover up a struggling state of affairs. They choose to gamble and take a risk in trying to fund and turn around Atlantic Train 1. We will not allow this government, the opposition will not allow this government to spin any false narrative that the investment that was made was with the hope of keeping the plant alive for the future on the future negotiations. And you know, they will come and tell you, this government come and tell you, it's about the country, and they took that risk, that investment of placing millions of dollars in that Atlantic Train 1, when they very well knew Mark Loquan, the president of NGC, and his team and the board headed by Chairman Conrad, knew that they had no gas for Atlantic Train 1. But they took your money, taxpayers' money, and invested in that. They were fully aware that the Train 1 rescue package defied logic. There was no business case for it. It violated, in our view, the fiduciary duty and contravened industry ethics. It was truly irresponsible, as reports suggest, that the president of NGC, Mark Loquan, and the vice president of commercial, Ms. Kwan V. Now, I want you to pay attention to that name, Kwan V. sought to base the company's 100% investment in the Train 1 turnaround on unutilized gas from the plants at Point Lisas, which had opted to implement the economic shutdown clause in their contract. It is unthinkable that individuals who were hired to ensure the proper operations of the company would base a multi-million-dollar decision on the impractical view that plants such as Stringent, MHTL, and Yara would remain shut down for all of 2021. So they gambled. They gambled, the NGC board and the executive management gambled that gas that was not being utilized based on the shutdown activity, economic activity by some of those energy companies, that they gambled that gas that belonged to them, that was assigned to them, could have been channeled to Atlantic Train 1, and that failed. Even worse, against all corporate standards, reports suggest that they tried to play hardball with another company called Methanex, by not offering them a better price so they can also utilize their quota of unused gas. This raises serious questions on the integrity of NGC. How can the only aggregator of gas work to undercut its own clients in our energy sector? The population must not believe for 1 minute that this was an investment gone wrong. It was a wrong investment from the start. Mark Loquan and the government knew from the very start that this rescue package on Atlantic Train 1 was a waste of the taxpayers' money. For this package to work, Loquan knew the plant needed a supply of approximately 150 MMSCF of gas and at least one contracted client to buy the offtake of the LNG produced. And that didn't happen. They didn't have the gas and they didn't have a person to purchase. When the board was first approached, when the board was first approached on December 2nd, 2020 to approve the rescue package, this is the NGC board, they refused as they were unsatisfied or unsure that the company, which is NGC, had the supply of gas to put into Atlantic Train 1. On December 3rd, 2020, BPTT, the largest shareholder in Atlantic Train 1, wrote the NGC reminding them of their inability to supply gas to Train 1. So one of the largest shareholders, the two largest shareholders, BP and Shell, they wrote to this government and NGC on December 3rd, 2020, telling them they did not have the gas to put into Train 1 and warned NGC that to take this shortfall into consideration before NGC invested further in that rescue package of Train 1. On December 4, 2020, with no offtake contract guaranteed, meaning no purchaser, and based on the gas supply on unutilized gas, Loquan convinced the board to approve this reckless decision. How could the board change its mind in 1 day? Did the government intervene? Did someone intervene? And that reminds me of the fiasco we had on August the 12th, when the police service commissioner forwarded the original merit list on August the 12th to the president's office and then pulled it back. And there was an allegation that there was some mysterious person that visited on August the 12th that encouraged the pullback of that original merit list. It sounds very similar to me, MP Dinesh. Whatever the reason there is, there's a clear indication that Loquan, the NGC board, and the government were well aware of the risk and acted, in our view, irresponsibly. The salt in the wound of every taxpayer of this nation is the manner in which the directors of NGC selflessly sought indemnity after they acted irresponsibly against the citizens of this nation. And we're talking about this indemnity. And I had raised a question to the Prime Minister, I think in Prime Minister's question in September. In September, Prime Minister, I raised the question whether an indemnity was given to the board of NGC. And back in September, the Prime Minister's response to me was no, he did not give, his cabinet has not given an indemnity as yet, because it didn't come to cabinet as yet. But if it did come, some consideration might be given. So I'm asking now, as we speak, today is November the 14th, I am asking this government, to the Prime Minister, has any indemnity been given to the board of directors of NGC as we speak today? That is the question I would like to ask the Prime Minister about that indemnity, given that we are now well aware that in our view, there will be no Train 1, there is no gas for Train 1. Over 34 million US dollars have been spent so far, and I say plus, which is over $240 million TT, plus has been spent so far. We are asking, the opposition is asking, has any indemnity been given to the board of directors of NGC, the chairman Conrad Enel, the CEO the president Mark Loquan, etc., and executive management? So we ask that question. The Prime Minister, Loquan, and Conrad Enel or any other member of the government would be hypocrites if they give the impression that only last week that the future of Train 1 was decided. There were clear signs previously, back in December in 2019 and December 2020, where there were clear signs that there were no gas for Train 1. Yet money kept spending by NGC in Atlantic Train 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to be asked about in NGC, Mark Loquan, and that whole entire board of directors who put in and waste our money, taxpayers' money, of over $240 million in that Atlantic Train 1. Now, $240 million is no small amount, according to the Prime Minister. It is small in the scheme of things of $1 billion company in the energy sector. I want to tell the Prime Minister, when people cannot get their paycheck on time, when people are struggling with the high food prices, when people are struggling to meet day-to-day expenses, when a lot of people are out of work, when the economic situation in our country is the worst, literally the worst in our history, when we are in a pandemic, I want to say $240 million is plenty money, Prime Minister. And it is the taxpayers' money we are talking about. It is not an energy giant money like BP and Shell that maybe $240 million is small compared in the kind of giant energy company that they are. But $240 million for us in Trinidad and Tobago, when our revenues are the lowest, when the Minister of Finance cannot get revenues or any new revenue streams, $240 million is a lot of money, Prime Minister. $240 million could repair some of our roads, our dilapidated roads in Trinidad and Tobago. It could provide water. It could assist the population with water. It can even assist in building the interchange at Macoya in the East-West corridor, Prime Minister. So $240 million is a lot of money, Prime Minister. So as I close, I will say more further on in another forum. I want to say that what we're witnessing today, the crisis that is facing NGC now, is not a one-off failure by this government, but rather is a part of the entire roadmap of deceit and destruction of the energy sector. And they must answer. Mark Loquan and his team must answer. We must never forget the billions waste in World GTL. Yet Malcolm Jones was not only let off scot-free, but was rewarded. Today, Mark Loquan is becoming the new Malcolm Jones, because every day he remains as a paid president of NGC. He's been rewarded for the chaos and crisis as NGC. I want the media not to forget about the betrayal, the biggest betrayal of Petrotrin and the closure of Petrotrin, when the Prime Minister said that he is not closing down Petrotrin, and yet Petrotrin was closed down a few days later. You must never forget the lies about restructuring Petrotrin, and Petrotrin has now become a scrap metal. And they fool the population with an election promise of giving Petrotrin to the union, the refinery, to refine. Yet today that refinery is still left in abeyance and in destruction. And as I end, this government has damaged this energy sector, erasing decades of progress to the point that have endangered the future generations and the economic stability of our nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just briefly keep the whole issue about NGC alive. My colleague Dinesh Rambali kept the whole issue of the TTRA Revenue Authority alive, and these are matters that we'll be keeping alive in the public domain and not allow it to go away. So again, I thank you, and I don't know if there are any questions from the media.
Actually, just answered it. Chief, we have one question from Gail Alexander at The Guardian. She wants to know if the opposition will be supporting the government's move to conclude the state of emergency when debated in the House on Wednesday.
Well, the question by Gail Alexander about the SOE. Well, the last time it is on public record that the opposition did not support the SOE at the first time, and it was the government who brought it to Parliament, and they extended it a further 3 months. And we are surprised, just like the population, to listen to the Prime Minister yesterday about he's now removing the state of emergency, and maybe Gail Alexander should ask the Prime Minister why is he really removing the state of emergency at a time when, and he has to bring us back to Parliament on Wednesday, when they ended Parliament on Friday, they called a date to be fixed, so they had no date to bring us back. Now they're bringing us back on Wednesday to debate the removal prematurely of the state of emergency that this government wanted. So that Gail should ask the government, ask the Prime Minister, why is he really lifting the state? Is it because of they want to canvass, to have canvassing in Tobago, because they are maybe they're behind the polls are showing that they are behind to PDP in that THA election. So, you know, we abstained the last time. It is on record, we abstained, and it is for the government to come and tell the country on Wednesday in that debate why they are removing or lifting the state of emergency early before time, because they have always said they want to follow the scientific data, the science of it. So let them come and tell the country in Parliament on Wednesday what is the science that is showing that they want to remove the state of emergency that they bought before time.
MP Ramley, this is a question from Carissa Lee at CXC3. She just wanted you to elaborate on your comment that the government is removing special majority, is creating loopholes in special majority legislation.
The government is, I wouldn't, I understand the question, but I wouldn't frame it as such that the government is creating loopholes. The law is clear, and this is something that the leader of the opposition spoke to in the parliament up to last Friday. What they are doing is that they are conveniently claiming that they have tailored certain pieces of legislation, the last one being the Revenue Authority, in such a manner that they don't require the special majority. But so long as you have laws which are going to encroach on fundamental rights, you have to be able to bring it to Parliament and seek the requisite majority, 3/5 in this particular case, and in some instances you have the 2/3 majority. But it is not a loophole, and this is where we are saying that they are deliberately going down a pathway of denying people's rights. So loophole is the term that we would use to say that, you know, this is what they are attempting to create, a loophole, but really it is something deep, and they are denying people their fundamental rights by these simple majority pieces of legislation which ought to be special majorities. So I thank you for the question, you know, but it is very deep that, you know, when we look at people's fundamental rights, that they should come and get the requisite support in the Parliament.
Mr. Lee, you spoke about, well, you asked the government to say exactly why the SOE will be lifted early, and then you mentioned, you know, Tobago elections coming up. If that is a reason, what are your thoughts on that, if the SOE is being lifted to accommodate Tobago election and campaigning?
Well, if that is a reason, as I stated, I'm just posing as you know, something out there in the public domain. And maybe on Wednesday, if that is, you know, if everyone feels that is really the true reason why it's being lifted, then the Prime Minister in his debate on Wednesday will tell the country that. Because we will challenge them. I mean, you know, because they wanted the SOE, you know, they said they had the reasons, the medical reasons, the scientific reasons for it. So let them come on Wednesday, and we are ready, and more will be said by our political leader on that whole area of state of emergency, maybe when she speaks tomorrow at our virtual on Monday. So stay tuned for that. I mean, there's more to it than what the Prime Minister said yesterday in his conference about lifting the state of emergency.
Anything else?
That's it. So thank you again to everyone for our Sunday morning presser. I want to thank the media for being here, the questions posed. Stay tuned to tomorrow, our Monday virtual, which is our featured speaker, as always, is our political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bissessa, with a dynamic team of individuals who will also be presenting tomorrow also. So I thank you once again for our Sunday presser.